This is Keys to the Shop, episode 170, Why Your Inventory Counts, with Pierre-Francois Rio and Amar of SwiftCount. Well, hey everybody, and welcome to another episode of Keys to the Shop, where we give you insights, inspiration, and the tools you need to grow as a coffee service professional. My name is Pierre-Francois. I'm your host for the show. Always happy to have you along. And great topic today, talking about inventory. Not necessarily a topic that is super fun on the outside, but it's something that just dramatically impacts your business. And we're going to find out a lot about just how dramatically it impacts businesses and what today's guests have done to really simplify that process for so many small and large retailers. These are the gentlemen behind the company SwiftCount. And yeah, it's going to be a really fantastic episode. Now, if you have not yet subscribed to Keys to the Shop, I would encourage you just hit the subscribe button. That way you would never miss an episode. And also share these episodes with a friend or with your staff if you find the content helpful, engaging, equipping in some way, and spread the love. That'd be really amazing. Now, today's episode is brought to you by the lovely people over at Prima Coffee. Prima Coffee is one of the world's best specialty coffee equipment suppliers. They curate the best equipment from all over the world to fit perfectly with what their customers need, be it for home use or for commercial use. So if you're in a position where you're getting ready to open a coffee bar and you need to get the right equipment and you want to feel confident that you're getting it from the right source, looking to Prima Coffee is definitely what I would recommend. Helping you succeed in making great coffee at home or in the shop is what drives them. And I would encourage you to check out prima-coffee.com and see what I mean. Once you're on their website, prima-coffee.com, you're going to find all sorts of resources along with an amazing selection of equipment. And these resources are free and high substance. They help you learn a little bit more about the equipment and equip you to make great coffee on it. So these are experts that are dedicated to your success. I would highly encourage you to check out prima-coffee.com for all of your coffee equipment needs and let them know that Keys to the Shop sent you. Thank you so much, Prima, for your support of Keys to the Shop. Today's episode is also brought to you by the Pacific Barista Series. This is the line of wonderful plant-based performance beverages that are designed specifically for professional baristas and the standards we all know professional baristas have for what they serve. So we could be using almond, soy, coconut, rice, or oat milk on bar. Take your pick, and its ability to take the heat from the steaming process, produce amazing latte art ready texture, and keep the flavor balance focused on coffee. All that and more makes it a perfect choice for your cafe's menu. I've been using these products for a long time on bar, and they absolutely are high performance, and they deliver on their promise to the customer. I would encourage you to get this product in your shop. Find out for yourself how it works with your coffee, and I know you're going to find, just like I have, that this is the best option for your non-dairy needs. Visit the website over at pacificfoods.com and learn more about the Barista Series line of plant-based performance beverages and how they can elevate the non-dairy game in your cafe. Thank you so much, Pacific, for your support of Keys to the Shop. Okay, so today we're going to be talking with Pierre-Francois Rio and Amar, who are the perfect people to talk to about inventory and its impact on your business and why really keeping track of your inventory well, it's something that really counts in the grand scheme of things. When you want a successful business, you have to stay on top of the inventory and know what's coming in, what's going out, and how that impacts your business. SwiftCount is a product management tool designed to simply and effectively help you keep track of your inventory and empower your small business. Not only does it do counts by creating and assigning concurrent counts by user, categories, or location, but it also can check products in and out of stock. You can assign your products to unlimited locations, and you can also create a product database with a simple scan or enter a product UPC anywhere that you are, and it will search the database and populate it with details, making adding new items a breeze and making your counts really easy to achieve. So this is able to give you a ton of detail in terms of what you have in your business and report to you on how you're doing, like how much money do you have tied up in inventory, how much money is your inventory making for you. Really a fantastic product. And in their years of business, they've seen a lot of examples of how inventory, whether done well or not, has had major impact on the performance of businesses. So, to give you some background, a little bit about who we're talking to today, Pierre-Francois Rio is an entrepreneur and he's a marketer with an obsession to help passionate business owners grow their business. At age 21, Pierre-Francois started his first company selling clothes to big box retailers in France as a way to get practical experience in his learning years in university. And then after the success of that, he decided to move to Canada to take on bigger projects. Today, Pierre-Francois took the challenge to popularize the importance of inventory counts when running small businesses, as well as bringing the tools to help implement this strong and misunderstood business practice. He is also the creator of Retail Secrets Podcast, a podcast that I was honored to be a guest on recently, which is a podcast that is for store owners and managers to learn what the big guys are actually doing to be successful in their retail businesses. We're also talking today with Albert Amar, who is the founder of the business SwiftCount. He is a business management specialist with over 25 years of experience in inventory strategy and software development for both small-size retailers and large enterprises. He started his entrepreneurial journey as a gift shop store owner, which he then sold to move on to solving the problem he and every retailer have to deal with when running a retail business, implementing the actions and habits necessary to practically manage your inventory. And so today's episode, all about inventory from the inventory specialists themselves. I'm really excited to talk about this and to just dive into some of the details about where this impacts your business, why we need to be on top of it, and some solutions and first steps that will help us all get on the right track to making our inventory count. So without further ado, let's get right to our conversation with Pierre-Francois Rio and Albert Amar of SwiftCount. Pierre, Albert, thank you for joining me on Keys to the Shop. I'm honored to have you on.
Hey, thanks, Chris. It's an honor to be here and super excited.
Thank you, Chris. Looking forward to it.
Absolutely. This is a topic that definitely, I don't think it needs an introduction because it is on the top of so many of our minds. The idea of inventory and tracking what goes in and out of our stores it's a pretty relevant and frustrating topic for a lot of people. We do the best we can, but I'm excited to talk about the work that you both are doing in this field and some of the things that we can do to make this easier for us. I wonder if we could just start by talking a little bit about your business histories and how did we end up at this point where inventory is the focus of what you do with your work now?
That's a good question. Basically, in my history, I had two companies. One was a distribution company, one was a small manufacturing company. And in both cases, we realized that you run the company, you try to create or import great products. You're focused on sales, you're focused on marketing, you're focused on everything. And, just assume that you're going to buy the stuff and it's going to sell. It's pretty, it's a good assumption usually. And then what happens after a few years is you end up with a whole bunch of stuff that you bought at some point or other. And you realize that unless you really keep an eye on it, things really go out of control and you have no idea. You just buy components, you buy products. And I know I'm talking about a distribution company here, but it's pretty standard to any inventory-based companies. You just buy stuff, you want to sell it. And the next thing you know, unless you monitor and pay attention to it, you're always focused on what's selling. And sometimes you kind of neglect what's not selling. And sometimes you also neglect what's selling. You don't buy enough of it. So unless you have a way to keep an eye on it and start paying attention, you cannot get into trouble. And that kind of happened to me where all of a sudden we realized we were starting to run out of cash and we had a warehouse full of products that all of a sudden we hadn't really paid attention to the movements. So we decided to put in an inventory system and it made a huge difference. All of a sudden we realized we had stuff that's been sitting there for years that we just don't pay attention because you're so busy as a business owner on a day-to-day basis, jumping on all the priorities that even though it doesn't hit you, it is actually a big priority. So once we put in place a system, we actually hired a company specifically to do that for us. And eventually that company was sold and we decided that the system that we had spent a lot of money investing in was maybe something that we could continue using. We couldn't go back into the same industry because there was a non-compete clause on once we sold the company. So but the technology we had developed for inventory was something that we were proud of and we thought really helped us. So we started showing it to other companies to try to hopefully help them as well.
And it just kind of took off from there, huh?
It took out from there. I mean, initially it was more consulting. So for the first few years, it was really more consulting and trying to put processes in place. And eventually we decided to build a solution that would help companies implement some of those consulting ideas and processes. And as we went through, we got approached more and more by smaller shops that wanted to have smaller retailers that figured it's important for them as well, and not just for larger companies. I mean, inventory control is a universal requirement. I mean, obviously, if you look at companies like IKEA's and all that, I mean, you're always impressed when you go and they know exactly what they have and where it is. We take that for granted, that if they tell you they have one product in aisle B5, you're going to go to aisle B5 and they'll be there. And obviously, in our day-to-day life, that's not like that. I mean, especially when we run a small business and we're doing all the different functions that we're supposed to do, we don't necessarily pay attention to the things that are important. And unless we have processes in place and tools that help you kind of keep an eye on things, it's very easy to lose control.
Yeah, absolutely true. Pierre, what's your story? How did you find yourself in this environment?
Yeah, so my story is like 30 years after Albert's started, but actually it's pretty recent for me that I got into retail, and I should say into inventory as well. I guess the first time I got into the retail world was when I was a student at university. I was back in France, and I was in this business class, and unfortunately, like many business classes, very few people actually have businesses or business projects going on. So we decided we wanted to create a project that would put us in the experience world. So we called that company Young Academic Ways. And what we did is basically we created sweaters that we were selling at university students and stuff like that. And then we quickly got a hold of the big box retailers in the region, and then national wise. So we started selling to those guys. I guess that's the first time I got in touch with retail, but moving probably 4 years ahead, 4 or 5 years ahead, I moved to Canada and started a job like everybody. Went through 5 years of visa after visa and sales jobs. And when it was time for me, I started looking at the different opportunities that I could join and actually help people have an impact. For the longest time, we're working with companies. To be honest, it was not of service to anybody. It was not great. And I just wished we had an audience and some people we could actually help with what we do. And it's actually right at that time that I met 3 amazing guys, and Albert is one of them. And we decided that we wanted to continue the SwiftCount adventure together. So I joined to help grow the company. And in the meantime, Chris, you know about it because you've been on the podcast too. Because I just started out in retail, the first thing that hit me was, well, I know absolutely nothing about retail and inventory. So I decided to launch that podcast as well. It's called Retailer Secrets, and basically share what I learn as I learn it. So that's been the little journey so far.
Wow. So how old is the company SwiftCount?
SwiftCount was started 3 years ago. It was a spin-off of our initial company, which was more consulting in the inventory. But the actual product SwiftCount was designed from the ground up about 3 years ago, and it's been active for about 18 months now. We have live customers that have been using it, and it's getting better and better and more features, obviously.
Great. So I wonder if you could just describe a little bit of what it is that SwiftCount does.
So basically what SwiftCount does, it just gives a retailer the ability to manage their inventory from the moment that it comes in to the moment that it gets sold. So for example, something comes in, you can use your mobile device and immediately scan it, or even just receive it, push it into your inventory, whether you have a purchase order that was issued for it or not. That's not a problem. You can do it with or without. You can monitor your inventory. You can also very easily do inventory counts, so that if you want to validate what you have, you can do regular counts. You can do the 80-20 counts. And we help the customer work through that. But the whole focus was to give the users the ability to do it as easily as possible using a very familiar device, their phone, doesn't matter what kind of phone, with or without a barcode scanner. It's really, we put ourselves in the foot of somebody who just wants to use their phone, wants to make it as easy as possible and as painless as possible. What I'd like to mention as well is that when you Google inventory control, you'll find that most systems will tell you that they have inventory control, and in most cases they do. What they mean by inventory control is they mean that they have a system that calculates how many you have on hand. So, for example, if you put into your system that you have 100 of an item, when you sell 5 of them, the system will do the math for you and tell you that you now have 95, which again is correct. The difference when you're using an inventory system as well as a point of sale system to validate is you're actually validating that that data is correct. So in the example that I just gave, you'd go and scan your products and confirm that you have the 95 that the system is telling you that you have. Because what may happen is if for any reason whatsoever you don't have those 95, maybe 4, 5, 6 went into the garbage, they wasted, they expired, whatever, your system doesn't know that. So when you get to your sales, you'll sell. When you get to the point where you only have 6 or 7 left, those 6 or 7 are no longer there. Now you have direct loss of sales, and that's a direct loss of revenue impacted by your inventory. So having the ability to validate that by quickly counting and scanning is really valuable.
So this makes all of the pain, or a lot of the pain of doing inventory less so, and it creates a better opportunity for people to actually get to the point where you got when you first recognized the importance of inventory, which is this is a lot of money sitting on the shelf, and we don't have as much cash as we really want to run the business. And people can avoid that learning curve just by having these types of tools at their disposal.
Yeah, inventory is like, especially in small retail, it's like it's just this thing that is not very sexy, but that is very much needed. And what we realized was a lot of inventory softwares out there are made for, it's like an interactive database. But the problem is in the store, the problem is not having the data in the computer. It's how do you get the data in the computer? And so a lot of the problems came from in the stores, not being consistent with the habits of inventory counts or receiving products, and the accuracy and efficiency of that was really bad because it just takes a lot of time. It's pen and paper. Maybe you graduate from pen and paper to tablets, spreadsheets, but it is not a, I guess, natural extension of the human hand or arm to do those things. So SwiftCount was built in that way to facilitate the habits of doing inventory. And so that's at the staff level, right, at the store level, but it's then taken from there and make manager and middle management and executive level. It gives them the ability to actually have the data and take actions from it.
Well, that's really huge because then you have a lot of decisions that are being made on inaccurate assumptions about what is or is not in the store at the moment, or how much money you have to work with at a given moment. I imagine you've seen a lot of that through your consultation, and now with SwiftCount as a company, there's probably a lot of missed opportunities that you see businesses having gone through as a result of this.
Absolutely. I mean, we've had many experiences in the consulting, and that's what led to creating a tool where people really are comfortable with their business. They're making money because they have high margins. They think they're good operators, and they are good operators in most cases because basically sales wash mistakes. So if you have high sales and good margins, you basically have a good business. You have money in the bank, things are working well. What you don't see is what you don't see, which is you could be making more. You might be having inventory going stale. You might be missing some sales on something that you don't have. You're not sure what your cost of goods sold. I mean, a good example, especially in the food industry, and I would think coffee shops especially, is to know what does it cost you to sell something. And it's not obvious to most people, but doing inventory tells you that. We have customers, for example, that do weekly inventory for 2 purposes. The first purpose is to be able to know that you're going to have everything you need for the next week's, because you're going to place your weekly order from your different suppliers. So you do inventory for your paper cups, for your coffees, for your ingredients, for your edibles, and so on. And so that does 2 things. Number one, it allows you to repeat your order, so you make sure that you have what you need for the following week for what you're going to sell. But number 2, if you use the data properly, you know what you counted last week and what you counting this week. The difference is your cost of goods sold. And if you put that in a simple system that allows you to see that, you can then determine, hey, I'm not selling any of these, and yet I have a lot of these. You can also determine that you have a higher margins on certain products or others. You can realize you have low margins on certain products that are showing us good sales, but if you have a low margin, they're really not that good items. So it allows you to make business decisions based on that information.
That's a very good point. And your cost of goods would definitely go up if you needed to have last minute ordering that costs you extra. And now, however many cents it costs you for the cup lid, straws, coffee sleeve, it's going to be more expensive. Profit Leader might not be as profitable if you're constantly having to play catch up with extra delivery fees for things that you could have avoided by having a more predictable flow of inventory.
Absolutely.
So in your experience with large businesses and small businesses, do you find, because it could go both ways, I'm thinking, as I've heard you discuss this, you talked about how in your business, it was easy to hang on to a lot of inventory because you were busy and it was a larger business. In smaller businesses, it also seems like you can overlook inventory to an equal degree. Who's a bigger culprit here? Who does this more often? Is it small operators or large, or is it pretty much equal?
I think it's pretty much equal. I think it all has to do with the philosophy of the owner. I mean, philosophy is the ownership of a business, in my opinion, has a direct effect on how the employees behave. The successful business owners that pay attention to their cost of goods, to their inventory, will impart that culture to the employees, and that'll serve two purposes. Number one, the employees will be a lot more responsible, and if they drop something on the floor and all that, they'll be able to keep track of it. But number two, it also allows the owners to separate himself from being on the business all the time. If he knows that they have employees that are responsible, that are going to do inventory on a weekly basis, he doesn't need to be there to make sure that we have everything we need for the following week. And that allows him to not only manage his business better, but also if he ever wants to expand. What we find a lot is, Pierre and I actually did a very interesting exercise. We spent a day walking the streets of Toronto and going into coffee shop and talking to people. And it was really interesting. At least 50% of the people we talked to said, I don't need to have inventory. I know what I have. I just take a look and I know what I have. And my question is always, it's great. So how are you going to be in two places when you open your second shop? And that's where they kind of get stumped a little bit. And so, some of them don't have any intention to open a second shop, and that's fair. I mean, if you know what you have and you're in your business all the time and your time is not that valuable and you want to be able to always run to the supplier and get some extra cups because you run out, that's your business, but that's not really the proper way of doing it, obviously.
Yeah, that's definitely the case for a lot of, especially just starting out coffee shops. They can just pivot and see their shelf and they say, well, I know what I have. I can actually see it right here. And so much of our decision-making process, especially in these environments, has to do with what's good for me now and not so much about thinking into the future of how am I going to plan for the inevitable. Like, what if people keep coming to your store? People keep buying what you're selling. Hopefully that's what you want. And you're going to grow almost whether you want to or not if you're doing the right things. So you're almost going to be forced out of that excuse.
Absolutely.
A funny anecdote, actually, Chris, was that day we went and saw a lot of different places. One of them was, I guess, a hybrid of it was a student coffee shop, but there was a bar as well. And so the funny thing is they didn't have inventory in place. And I think they were right at that point that they started looking at how can we better it. And they were basically, trying to keep track on spreadsheets. And what's funny is what we realize is the businesses who don't have right now the business practice and the habits of doing it without an inventory system, most likely if they get an inventory system, they won't use it well anyway. They need to first get in the habit of doing the exercise. But the funny story about one of them that we saw was it was actually the owner would come every 2 days or so, who was not I guess active business owner. He had another job on the side, but owned that coffee shop. He would come in and serve himself like a glass of whiskey or something. and so this is obviously not going into the inventory system. And so the managers was just going crazy with that because he could not keep track of his cost and all of that, right? And so when it comes to a small business, in this case, it was just funny. It was the owner and taking from the bar, but it usually is some, a cup that falls or anything like this, something that falls and it's wasted and it doesn't go in consideration when when looking at the data, I guess the bigger picture, and trying to week after week operate the business. And you think you have this much left, but really you don't. And so you see a lot of different types of practices throughout the whole, small business or small retail world.
That's true. Yeah. And just have a consulting client who we had a conversation about this just recently, how, when there's things donated and or things that are given as, hey, I'm here for a meeting with this business person, and you take from the cooler or you take from the pastry. If there's no system in place, then your managers are going to be left holding the bag and figuring out like, well, now I don't know, is that a sale? Because now I don't know if that muffin got sold or where did it go? You kind of shoot yourself in the foot and maybe set your staff up for failure because of these poor habits.
Absolutely. We actually had a good example where their main focus was to be able to track the waste, because on paper they had a profitable business, and yet every week they've never made what they thought they were supposed to make. And then they found out that at the end of every day, they were throwing out some muffins that hadn't been eaten. They were, consuming them. It didn't really matter. I mean, they were going to go to waste anyway. So unless they so they actually implemented the system just to be able to track what are we not selling, because that needs to be added to the cost of goods to then give you a better picture of where you are at your business. So there's many reasons why you want to be able to know what you have, not necessarily to punish the employees. I mean, there is a saying about trust but verify. You just want to make sure that everything is accounted for. If you drop the muffin on the floor, obviously you don't want to sell it. You're going to throw it out. Account for it. It's not a big deal. It's an accident, happens to everybody. But at least it explains at the end of the week why we didn't have as good a week as we thought we should have based on the sales.
Yeah, great point. And having a system like yours in place in a shop would make the process of doing that so much easier, where in the moment you're thinking, okay, if I'm a barista and I'm a closer and it's been a hard day, I have very little bandwidth to be able to invent a system right then and there. If one doesn't exist already and there's not a clear path or directive, it's easy to just make the decision that's easiest for me and not the one that's most advantageous for the business in that moment.
Exactly.
So you mentioned some examples here so far, and these have been great. I wonder if you have any examples of businesses that have been sort of missing the mark on their inventory and turn themselves around by rectifying the way that they track what comes in and what goes out of the business.
Well, one example that I like to give is one of our larger clients. He has about 70 different locations. He sells popcorn. So it's fairly low volume, probably high margin, but a product that's fairly easy you would think, to mess up or to throw away or to give away. He has an incredible tight inventory control. They do inventory every week on all the ingredients, on the actual weight of the kernels that they're supposed to cook. And without that, he wouldn't be successful. I mean, the only reason he's as successful as he is because of the tightness of his inventory and how his operations people are looking over every single store every single week to make sure that the tendency is really equal. And that's a very good example, because when you have 70 replicated locations, not only you need a very tight system to be able to keep track of it, but it becomes fairly easy to see if one of your location is completely out of whack. I mean, the cost of goods and the actual inventory should obviously be in direct correlation with the sales. The rest is all standard and consistent from location to location. So having a really good system, what he's telling us is not only it's helped making sure that all the stores are profitable and making sure what they have, but also it makes all the employee very accountable on how they handle the goods, how they make sure that nothing gets wasted, and how they make sure they account for everything that they sell. So in his case, that actually made a huge difference. Implementing the system went from being on in the dark to what he says in the light right now.
So imagine this is a really attractive thing, and maybe even more appropriate for smaller operators, or at least I feel like they must be more motivated, or should be more motivated to stay on top of those details, since there is, like in coffee, there's not a lot of money in starting a coffee bar. So it's nickels and dimes and pennies, and you really should be wanting to stay on top of that because you got to fight for every inch you get with these small businesses.
Absolutely. I mean, I would think it's critical to make sure that you know what you have so you don't overbuy. Just make sure you have enough so that you can cover your potential sales, and also that you make it that it's run as a business with a culture. The tendency sometimes is because people have a small business, and whether it's successful or not, is to treat it as a small business. But a business is a business, whether it's small or big. I mean, if it's small and you put good practices in place, there is a chance it might grow big. Otherwise, you're basically creating yourself a job and you're fighting for every dollar that you make.
Albert, have you found that to be true going from the larger scale businesses to then walking the streets of Toronto and having small clients that these principles apply across the board?
The one thing I would say that I find is consistent from a large business to a small business is that it always trickles down from the top. If you have an owner operator that's conscientious of how the business is run, respectful of his inventory, putting in place systems to make it easy for their employees, not just demanding it, it trickles from the top down. And it doesn't matter if you have 150 employees or if you have 3. The principle is the same. As long as you have processes in place and you have systems in place, obviously it'll be different systems for larger businesses, but the principle is the same. I mean, you want a tool that's easy to implement, something that's easy for people to use to count, and especially in the retail environment where you're probably going to hire either part-timers or people that may not be as experienced as warehouse people that do that all day long. You want to just make sure that you give them something that's easy and you make it a requirement. It's part of the job description. It's not something that you use if you want to. This is how the job is done. You do this, just like you have to learn how to cash out a sale. You have to learn how to count your inventory at the end of the day, at the end of the week, whatever your process is that you've decided. And then once it's implemented, it becomes easy to maintain.
What are the first steps that we can take to start to correct some of our inaction when it comes to inventory, to kind of climb out of the hole and get a grip on inventory?
So one of the things that we have noticed, and taking on the example of one of our customers sells popcorn, it is such a great example because it's very similar to the coffee shop store. So I like to take that. But before they used SwiftCount, they were already doing inventory, right? So some of those processes that we're going to talk about, you can start right now. You don't need anything, to be honest. You just need to get at it. And the key here is really to make it easy for the counters or for the employees, because that's where it starts, right? Garbage in, garbage out, right? So you need to have accurate and efficient processes at the count level in order to do the rest, right? So that's where it starts. And what we've seen and what we always recommend is, first of all, you got to understand what your products are and the value they have for your business. So we like to call them the 80-20, right? The 20% of products that account for 80% of your sales or revenue. And that can be done either because of the cost or the volume you sell. But that's the first thing. What is important is once you figure that out, you want to put in place a frequent or regular system in place. And by system, I mean you need to count those products. And there's really no way around counting here, and specifically for small businesses. So what we like to call them is high volume, high value. Those products, for example, the popcorn stores and the other coffee shops that we work with, they count them weekly. They want to monitor them weekly so that they make sure these 20% that account for 80% of the result, they are under control 100% of the time. And so the key is to make that start easy, right? You don't need to count everything all the time. You figure out first what matters the most and implement that. And once you have that under a certain habit, then you can start implementing, the monthly counts for everything. And that's really where it starts.
One example that we have is we have a customer that has a few coffee shops. And we have a feature in our application called Recurrence, which basically allows you to create a count and then say, okay, I want to count every week. So they created a multiple of counts, which are basically linked to their product categories. So all the paper products, all the ingredients for baking products, all the coffee products, all the cups, whatever. You probably know much better than I do what the different categories are in a coffee shop. So basically, he's created recurring counts on different days of the week based on those different categories. And again, that goes back to what I was saying a little bit earlier, which basically allows him to do two things with that. So on Wednesdays, he's going to order all his paper products. So before he does the order of the paper product, the count will get created automatically with all the items because he set it up to automatically set up. All the users will get a notification on their phone saying, oh, you have to go and count the paper products. And then the list will come up and they'll just go through. They can use a camera to scan if they have barcodes, or they can just swipe with their finger. It's very, very simple. It takes maybe 20 minutes for them to do those counts. And then as soon as they finish the count, then they have the ability to see both what they need to order for the week, because obviously they have minimums that they have to maintain. And based on the consumption, the minimums are going to be reduced. But they also push that information back into their accounting package. I think they use QuickBooks, which then creates also the adjusting entry for the cost of goods, so they know what their cost of goods was on that category for the week. So it's a very simple process, but once they put it in place, it just becomes part of the routine. On Wednesday at 2:00, we do the paper products. On Tuesday at 4:00, we do the coffee, whatever. So it's all about putting in place systems and just maintaining them, and then just becomes part of the job.
Yeah, exactly. In the initial process, there might be some atmospheric drag. Whenever it's a new system, even if it's the easiest system in the world, everyone's maybe some groaning about an extra work or whatever. But eventually, it does, like you say, become part of the work, and you don't really think about it anymore after a while, and it starts compounding interest. Essentially, that it benefits you as the longer you use it, and you stop thinking about it as much the longer you do it. So in this process, you have like item profiles on your system that you put in there. So you scan a barcode and you know that in that box there's 1,000 cups, for example. So you've just counted 1,000 cups by scanning one box.
Absolutely. Yeah, we have what we call multiple unit of measure. So you can have a unit of measure for a cup or a box of 100 cup or a case of 1,000 cups. So you just scan the one barcode and automatically the system will know. Again, I mean, it takes a little bit of time to set it up because now you have to enter 3 different units of measure, but the payout is huge. I mean, the bottom line is that, as Pierre was saying before, most people actually do that, except they do it either in a pad of paper or they do it in Excel. Mm-hmm. So with a little bit of preparations, you actually set it up so that it becomes a lot easier to just do on a recurring basis.
What are some of the things people can expect when they first start taking charge over their inventory in terms of, I think I maybe just said something there about like atmospheric drag in terms of what you can expect from your staff. Maybe it's going to be a learning curve. When you look at your clients that use SwiftCount and they start implementing these things, some of them for the first time, it's the first maybe counting system that they've used. What are the things that we should be prepared to deal with as this becomes just part of the routine?
Human nature is to resist changes. So the employees are going to be grumpy right off the bat. Why do we need it? We've been doing well ever since without. And again, it goes all back to, it has to be set up as non-negotiable. This is what we're doing. The employees don't have obviously we want buy-in from them and we want to make sure that they embrace it. And we've seen customers where the employees were the biggest promoters of the system because they realize that even though it'll be a little bit of a hiccup at the beginning to onboard, once it's used on a regular basis, it actually makes their job easier. So it's just a matter of making sure that the procedures are set properly, that the system is well described, and realize that what it's going to do for us, and then get over the initial grumpiness and just convince the employees that it's for the better for the business, and what's better for the business is better for them in the long term.
And another thing too that we see a lot, especially with new onboarding, so the small businesses that just are starting out using the program is, like Albert said, there's usually resistance, but even around resistance, when they start using the product, there are a lot of questions that raise up, right? So what is important is, especially at the beginning, being open to answer every single question that might be, going on in their head. Rather it is, the staff or middle management or executive level, doesn't really matter, because the thing is, nobody is going to think about it until it is time to do it, right? So even if, for example, we have all the documentation in the world and all the videos to explain everything. A thing that is important is we try to have, for example, weekly Q&A when you can log in every Wednesday and answer all the questions you have or anything of this sort, so that you can keep the questions answered going as it goes live. Because most likely it will take a few weeks to get used to it, especially if you have part-time employees and a good I guess turnover and so those are like, the onboarding is always the biggest part to make it a success.
So that's all kind of focused on the employees, and then there are the managers and the people who brought this in and now are responsible for it. What kind of learning curve can we expect in our own habits? Because likely we've just got so much on our plate and we've got our rhythm, and now we need to onboard this into our own systems, personal systems as leaders, so that it's going to be something that we just don't let fall off in the future. We need to curate this thing and keep it going.
Well, the key is really the information that's being picked up on the floor. As far as the managers are concerned, the process is extremely simple, and what they will benefit from is the ability to see graphs, to see efficiencies. So they'll actually really benefit from seeing that information. In terms of what they really have to do, other than creating purchase orders and reviewing the counts, the whole app is designed so that it's focused on the people using it on the floor. The back end with all the information is extremely simple to use. We usually find that after a week or two, it just becomes a thing of, another thing that you're using that you get used to. It's really not a complicated platform. It's a lot simpler than adopting a new accounting package, for example. So it's an add-on to a lot of accounting packages, and it's just a tool. It doesn't really do that much when you think about it. I mean, it does a lot for the business, but in terms of what it does, especially for the retailers, out of all the functionality that we have in SwiftCount, the two things that are the most used by the retailers is basically receiving the goods, make it as easy as possible, just use your phone and receive, and count. Once you've done that, the rest is just information that you can review on a dashboard or export to Excel, and then view some graphs that show you the different usage of your products and stuff. That's kind of interesting for our customers to review eventually. But again, as far as the retail part is concerned, we try to keep it as simple as possible and not overwhelm the users so that they will use it.
And then the beauty is later on, because I guess what can't be measured can be improved, right? I think that's the saying. I'm not sure, but it sounds like this. But the idea is, I guess the beautiful thing is for the managers, they have access to history, right? So they're able to, in the long run, actually see if there are patterns in the use of their products, in the cost of goods, and all of this. So it is just easy to use once you have all the data in place. But the key is really putting the data in, and that comes, at the floor level and doing the work, right?
Right, exactly. So in all of this, as we're wrapping up here, and this has really been helpful because it's not really talked about that often. Inventory is sort of swept under the rug, or maybe literally, and it's going to make a big impact on your business. And I'm glad that we've got companies like yours that are making a difference for people. What is the one thing that you really want people to have at the top of mind when it comes to how they perceive their inventory, the impact that it can have on their business and quality of life, really, as a business owner?
The whole idea of, the way I look at inventory, it's one of the key items on your balance sheet. What is your business worth? Your business is worth the money you have in the bank, the business is worth your assets, and then the business is worth your inventory. What else do you have? You don't have receivables probably in a coffee shop. So if you look, you have three pillars of your business, and inventory is one of them. So if one of them is shaky, or you don't know where it is, you don't know where your business is at. So, you have a table with three legs. You remove one leg, the table will be very shaky.
Well put. Well, I'm grateful for this table leg that you're giving us in the form of SwiftCount. And I want to thank you for joining us today. And how can people stay in touch with you all and learn more about SwiftCount?
Yeah, absolutely. So if you want to have some good inputs, like, from people like Chris, obviously, you're going to have to check out Retailer Secrets so that you can have, we have other experts and business owners on so that we can talk about those challenges. So that's the first thing. And the second thing is, if you want to check out SwiftCount, I would suggest that you go to join.swiftcount.com/keys to the shop. And if you opt in there, we'll get a little surprise for you then.
Excellent. Thank you so much to you both. And this has just been really a fascinating conversation. And I can't wait to see how people take this information and kind of change their businesses as a result of it. Thank you once more.
Thank you very much, Chris.
Thank you.
Well, I really appreciate Pierre-Francois and Albert coming on the show to talk to us about this, because this is a subject that definitely needs to be talked about more. For a lot of us, in terms of what we do for our inventory, I don't know that there's a lot of upgrading that happens. If it works in the beginning, it tends to be the type of system that we just keep around forever, really, even if it's just a pen and paper. Now, that said, we ended this conversation with some great advice, and that is you just have to start. And that means if you're not doing inventory, just start doing something. Start keeping track of what's coming into the shop and what's going out, and then get in that habit. That really helps shape the way that you view the inventory in your store, and it won't let you sort of let things slip through the cracks. If you're currently doing inventory with something like a pen and a paper, or even with something like Google Sheets, which is something that I have done as well, is you can always upgrade to something that will give you a little bit more in terms of feedback on how that inventory is moving in your business, things it'll give you reports about cost of goods. And this is kind of thing that SwiftCount does. And if that's you, if you're in the market to be able to upgrade the way that you track your inventory, and you want to know a little bit more about how it impacts your overall business and help you make decisions about scaling, about editing your menu items, etc., maybe SwiftCount is for you. You can find out more over at SwiftCount.com, and encourage you to peruse the website, see if that's something that fits for you. But take the words in this conversation and apply them to your situation where you can, and challenge yourself to get more accurate and more on top of your inventory and really make it count for your business. Thank you very much, Pierre-Francois and Albert, for coming on the show. It was really an honor to have you both on. And thank you for the work you do to help us in our businesses. I know it's really making an impact, and it's helped us here on the show as well. So on to some news about something you can also count on, and that is Coffee Fest. You can count on them to deliver a lot of value to you as a retailer. I have been going for so long, and I've been an instructor, presenter, and judge. And this show, the way it is shaping up now, it's better than it ever has been. And that's saying something, because Coffee Fest has always been the best trade show for coffee retailers, hands down. The LA show is coming up quickly, and I have a discount code for you to use. If you're going to be going to LA, discount code 87714. That'll save you 50% on registration. That's 87714. Go to coffeefest.com and then look for the Los Angeles show tab. The show is happening on the 25th through the 27th in conjunction with the Healthy Food Expo. And there are so many free seminars and affordable classes and programs for you to take part in. This is the place to get equipped if you want to up your game in your current coffee retail journey, or if you're about to start your coffee retail journey and need more clarity. This is the place again to go. Lots of different tracks of education that you can plug into, all color-coded so that you can read it on the class list and easily know what category you're interested in. Very well organized and awesome people as well. Coffeefest.com. Use the registration code 87714. And if you're there at Coffee Fest in LA and you see me, please do say hello. I'd love to meet you. And I hope to see you at Coffee Fest. Now, if you want to reach out to me, you can always do so by emailing chris@keystotheshop.com for all of your questions, comments, and feedback, or your inquiries into working with Keys to the Shop Consulting to help you take your business's operations and your quality to the next level. Happy to talk with you about what you need in terms of consultation and training, and we can just set up a phone call for that. And I'd be honored to speak with you and see how Keys to the Shop Consulting can help. So email me, chris@keystotheshop.com. And with that, that is our show. Thank you so much for taking the time to join me. I appreciate all of you so much, and I hope that this was very instructive for you. And of course, I hope that this episode has truly given you keys to the shop.